Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's just 3 o'clock, so I think we're still waiting on a few others to join, but we will jump in and get started, and we can circle back on some information. But I wanted to welcome you. My name is Tina Lapp. I represent Calibri Learning Group of Companies. And at Calibri Learning Group of Companies, we're a real estate professional education and training company that includes Hondros College in Ohio, Superior School of Real Estate in North Carolina, Allied Schools in California, Arizona School of Real Estate and Business, and Hogan School of Real Estate, which are both in Arizona. And then we also offer education in all 50 states through our brands Real Estate Express and McKissick. So just a little bit about us as an organization, and we want to thank RISMedia for working with us to put this on for everyone today. So thank you all for being here. Here's a quick outline of the agenda for today. So we will do some quick introductions, and I want to meet the fabulous panel we have for you. And we will explore, is now a good time to get into real estate? What does a career in real estate look like? How do you go about getting your real estate license, choosing a real estate school, how to choose a real estate company or a brokerage to work with, and what some of those startup costs look like. So as we go into this, I'd like to start by introducing our fabulous panel. We have both Mike and Al available with us today, and they're both real estate professionals, industry experts, and professional educators. They've been working in the real estate industry for years. They work with individuals as they start off their new career and throughout their career life cycles as they develop their skills and build their business. So I think I will start with introducing both of them. So why don't we start with Mike? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Tina. Mike Brandley. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. I have been, without stating the number of years, an auctioneer for a lot of years, so I talk fast. In my day job, I sell real estate, an appraisal company as well, and we do expert witness work in the auction and real estate related business around the United States. In fact, we've done auctions all over the United States and sold some real estate in multiple states. And I've had a pleasure teaching real estate, pre-license, post-license, CE, that kind of thing, since about 2003 or 4 when I got started with that. So enjoy that as well in my so-called spare time.
That's fabulous. Doesn't sound like a lot of spare time, but thanks, Mike. And Al, will you tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. I've been a full-time licensed agent since 2001, and I have been teaching since 2010, so 10 years of teaching now. And I train agents, mentor agents, have sold again full-time for almost 20 years now. And there's not much spare time either, but we get it done. We find a way.
Well, I think that's fabulous. And I also want to mention that we have Jessica, who is joining us in the background. She is going to be monitoring the questions panel. So we do have everyone muted because we have a lot of people on the call. However, if you do have questions, and again, I hope we're going to answer most of those today, you can submit questions into the questions panel. And after we get through some of the material, we're going to defer to Jessica and have her share some of those questions with us. So I think, the best place to start is, the world is unique today. We are facing unprecedented challenges. And many people have been asking, is now a good time to enter the real estate industry? Is it strong? What does it look like? So let's start with that and talk about, is now a good time to get started in real estate? So why don't we start with Al? Would you comment on that, please?
Yes, I actually always say there's never a bad time to get into real estate. You know, real estate is cyclical throughout the year. The markets are always cyclical as well, from, you know, year to year, period to period. And so right now is a seller's market. So it's great to have listings. Properties are selling really fast. And so really there is no bad time to get into real estate, because there's always one side or the other. We tend to work buyers, sellers, investors. So you can always find a way to generate business no matter what's going on with the market. You just have to, you know which way to go and what makes sense for you at the time.
Yeah, that's great insight, Al. And Mike, anything additional to think about or to add as someone's considering career in real estate? Is now a good time?
Oh gosh, Tina, I think it is. And I get asked a question oftentimes in classes, when did you get your real estate license? And I tell them that, and they say, do you have any regrets? And probably the best answer to that, or the one I use most of the time, is I wish I had got it sooner. I wish I'd got started sooner, because the sooner you start, the sooner you can get to where you're headed. So there's no bad time, as Al says. And I would add to Al's comments about being in a seller's market. Strong market on the seller side, prices up, shortage of supply, lots of buyers. That's maybe a touch easier way to start than starting in a down market, a buyer's market, where there's lots of supply and not many buyers. And if you can get your training wheels on, jump out of school and work in a slightly easier marketplace, and then when that down market comes, and I don't have a crystal ball, but you know, is it 3 years, 2 years, 4 years from now? Do we then, those agents that started 3, 4 years ago, say, hey, I've got some experience. I'm not just popping out of school. I've been here. I can take the training wheels off. Now I'm ready for a little tougher market in some respects, but they've got some expertise, some experience that they can carry them through that. So I just think it's a perfect time to get that real estate license in a strong market here. I don't think there's any better time.
That's great insight. So that being said, you know, when people think about a career in real estate, they often think about representing a seller. And there are several different career opportunities when someone enters the real estate industry. Mike, can you talk a little bit about what those different career options are?
Gosh, I can, Tina, and you're right. A lot of people see the real estate industry and think, well, I'm going to have listings, because that's all they're familiar with. That's what their mother or father or family member did, was have listings. And we haven't represented buyers throughout the United States for all that long. So that's kind of a new market. You can represent buyers or sellers. But here's the thing. That's not all you can do with a real estate license. That's not hardly all you can do with a real estate license. There's appraisal that kind of comes off the real estate side. Maybe that interests you, valuation or working on appraisals. There's finance related things, lending. There's title work, and title agencies or title companies hire real estate licensees. There's government work, might be auditor, recorder, engineer, that kind of thing that hires a real estate licensee. Investing. Lots of real estate licensees say after a few years, I'm taking advantage of being the client. I want to buy, flip, fix up, sell, rent, what have you. That's an option. And teaching and or association. There's just lots of different places, real estate licensees. It doesn't limit you to one particular venue. It really opens up a lot of doors. And lastly, I would encourage folks taking classes to have an open mind. Sit in that class and take it all in, and then maybe decide, oh, this is interesting or this is interesting, because there's lots of options.
That's great advice and great insight. Al, any additional color or commentary on that as you see it?
No, Mike mentioned a lot of options there. There are even some specialty areas within just selling, representing buyers and sellers. There are folks who do just land. There are farms, right? There's commercial, of course. There are even people who specialize and only do air rights, buy and sell air rights and things like that. Those are very niche and very specific. But depending on the connections you have, what your sphere of influence is, many times agents end up in those little specific areas that really they make a career out of. So it even goes even further, the tentacles stretch even further than what Mike mentioned, which he covered quite a bit in his list. So
Yeah, there are certainly a broad spectrum of opportunities within the real estate industry, and that's fabulous. So you've been in real estate for a while, Al. Can you
mhm.
talk to us a little bit about what a day in the life of a real estate professional looks like, and what kind of hours or schedules, part-time or full-time?
Yeah,
It could be all over the board, but would love some
yes.
thoughts.
This is always an interesting question because um, the beauty of the business is that there is no specific way your day goes. Okay. It is good to time block and to be able to get certain things done. But the flexibility is one of the reasons why a lot of people who are probably listening to this are looking to get into the business. And so flexibility is what you have, but that means no 2 days are ever the same. No days of the week are ever the same. You have the flexibility to kind of, structure your day how you choose within the parameters of your client schedule as well. So, um, that's a beautiful thing. And for, because you have that freedom to work with your clients, do your personal stuff, do your family stuff, kind of mix it all in and not be behind a computer or sitting at a desk in a cubicle or office all day long. You get to, go out and touch the people, talk to the people, see the properties, do all of those things. But you have to get up and go to work every day, right? You have to get up and go to work every day because if you don't sell, you don't eat. So you have the flexibility, but you also have to have the discipline, right, to follow through. So the day in the life, as you see on the slide there, flexible schedule, working with people out and about a lot. It's amazing. That's what I love about it.
Yeah. And so you certainly displayed how you wear many hats. There's no
Yes,
doubt, right?
yes,
Excellent.
yes,
Excellent.
yes.
And Mike, your experience, you've had a little bit different experiences too. Any additional color to add to that?
Well, I would just suggest to folks that get a real estate license, graduate, pass that test, that type of thing, to explore. Keep an open mind. I mentioned keeping an open mind when you sit in class. Let's keep an open mind once you're out there, and see what other agents are doing. And I get asked, and Al does too, how do I become successful in real estate, or what's it take to be successful? And I often answer that, find successful people and hang around them, uh, grab on. And so you can find a successful agent, or a team approach, or a mentor or something, and watch and keep an open mind and keep your eyes open as to how are people being successful in this industry, and that will lead you to those successes. Relatedly, a lot of people wonder, and I think we're going to talk about this more, but can I keep my day job? Or should I quit my job and jump in the pool in the deep end right off the bat? And you can answer that. You can do either. You can start part-time, you can jump in full-time. If you have a spouse or a partner or somebody that has a stable income, it makes it a little easier to jump in, maybe full-time. If you're a sole breadwinner, so to speak, maybe you keep that day job for a little bit. But golly, lots of choices, lots of options. And you're your own boss. I see that and it always makes me smile when I see that you're your own boss. Um, yeah, or maybe you have a lot of different bosses, but you have a different boss every
Yeah, yeah. Clients are our bosses, right?
day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
One other thing, if I might add,
Yeah, please.
as I listened to Mike, is systems. In today's world, it's 2020. There's a lot of different systems that do a lot of the same things, but with technology, we do a lot of our business now, right from these devices, right from our phones, our tablets. We don't spend a lot of time in a cubicle or in an office, like real estate agents used to do 20 years ago when I got into the business. We literally can work from, our phones, our tablets, our computers, wherever we can connect to the internet. We don't even chase paper and ink anymore, right? So we're not faxing documents, we're not getting ink signatures. It's all literally electronic. So it's actually streamlined our day and our business, but it's also made it busier because we try to squeeze so much into it, right? Just like everybody else with with our devices, is squeezing so much in because we feel like we can get so much more done. But I remember the days of chasing paper and ink, right? Carrying a
And big
bag on my
MLS
shoulder.
book.
Exactly. Carrying a
Right.
bag that wore a groove in my shoulder because of all the files and paperwork I had to carry around with me. And
Mhm.
now, again, it's literally all right here in the device. So, when we talk about, is it a great time to get into business? Absolutely. These have made it so much easier, right? So yes. So day in the life, you decide, as Mike said, right? Yep.
That's great. So let's talk about the question we always seem to get is it's really, I'm sorry, a little bit more about how much can I expect to make as a real estate agent? So, Al, why don't you give some commentary there?
Well, this one is always an interesting question as well. Here's the great thing about the real estate business. There is no ceiling, right? You can make as much money as you want to make. And I always try to be real and realistic about, how this business goes, because people need to know what they're getting into. There is no ceiling. You can make as much money as you want to make, as hard as you want to work, as much as you want to prospect, get out there and do it. There's no limit. Okay. The key is, again, you have to get up and go to work every day, because there's no ceiling, but there's also no floor either. Right? And so the bills keep coming whether you're selling or not. And if you don't sell, you don't eat. And so I think the real core of that question is that you have to be self-motivated, intentional about your day and your time and your conversations, so that you can maximize your income. Of course, around the country, various amounts are really based on price ranges and those kinds of markets and where those price points are. So I don't like to give, I don't want to give any particular numbers, because again, that varies from one end of the country to the other. Um, just know that literally there is no ceiling. And literally you can grow your business and make, 6, 7 figures even, um, if that is your goal to achieve. So yeah, that's, no limit, no ceiling.
Yeah. Al or Mike, any additional comments on that?
Well, Al's given the expert advice here in terms of realizing what the potential is. And as he said, there's no floor either. So you can't just sit at home and wait for the phone to ring. You got to be out in it. Um, I tell agents that ask me, how do I really become a superstar? How do I really get to where some of these agents, some of these salespeople have gotten to, in terms of millions of dollars of production, tens of millions, hundreds of millions? And my answer is pretty consistent. I tell them, well, you know what they're doing? They're experts. They're specialists. And not that you have to specialize necessarily right away, but as you enter the real estate industry, the more you have a particular expertise, a particular wheelhouse, if you will. Well, that's my area. The more in demand you are, because there's not as much competition. If you're the guy or the gal, I mean, if you're just it, they got to hire you. I told a class here the other day, I look for clients that need me more than I need them. And when they call you and say, hey, I've heard about you, I looked online and you appear to be the guy, you appear to be the gal, we've heard about you. Boy, this business gets a lot easier because they're calling you. And the more you can hold yourself out as or associate with people who are experts, the more money you're going to make. That would be my theory. I've seen it work time and time again.
That's really, really great advice. And I do want to mention to the individuals joining us today that we do have an income guide and a career guide available on all of our websites. And I think we are going to send that out to everyone after this event so that you'll have access to that, and we'll have individuals available to answer additional questions too. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that we will be sending a little bit more information about some statistics and what some people are reporting in, so we can get that and send that to everyone. So, but great insights. So now that we have gotten into, what a day in the life is, let's talk about licensing and how one would go about getting a real estate license. And I know we've got individuals from all over the country joining us, so thrilled to have everyone here. But let's go through a little bit about the steps to licensure. So, Mike, can you go into what some of the expectations as far as getting a real estate license, what those steps look like?
Sure, and as Tina has told you, it varies state to state, so there's no uniform licensing law here in the United States. So every state gets to design their own requirements to get a license. But I would say generally for all of you listening in, there's going to be some pre-license education. There's going to be some classes that might be 36 hours, 82 hours, 120 hours, or 200 hours, but whatever it is, pre-license, before license education. Typically, then the next step is choosing a broker. Not all states have that broker salesperson model, but most do, and filling out an application and scheduling yourself to take the state issued license exam. So once you do that, and I would think for the most part, most of that can be done in a month or so, in some states even less. So say you start today, you might have a real estate license a month from now, plus or minus, and be with a broker or be with a company. And as the slide says here, you're going to have to be 18 for the most part around the United States, and might be a background check involved and that kind of thing. But that's how you get that license, and find a provider, find a company to provide that pre-license education who also gives you test preparatory products and hints and insights into how to pass that test. You might as well roll that all together. So that's who you want to find.
Yeah, I think that's great. Al, any other comments on the licensing process?
Mike just about covered that whole process. What I will say is when you're taking the courses, try not to get too overwhelmed, because some states do have quite a few hours, right, that are required. And there's a lot of information that could come your way during those hours. Try not to get too overwhelmed with it. Most of our, schools that were mentioned at the beginning through, the Calibri group, we offer, the education that you definitely need to pass the test. You can focus on that. A lot of it is repetition, which is great during those hours because you get to hear the same material, multiple times, depending on your schedule and the availability in your state of the classes. Yes, you can get them done pretty quickly, but it's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes. But you want to be careful, again, not to get too overwhelmed yourself, and just take it as it comes. And here's what else I would say. If thousands upon thousands of folks have been able to get their real estate license, finish the courses, get their license, pass the tests, you can do it too, right? And so don't feel like it is too much for you, because if tens, if not hundreds of thousands of folks have done it over the years across the country, you definitely can get it done. Just go in, be a little relaxed, don't be too overly concerned. Take in the information, review the information, use all the study tools and practice material given to you through the Calibri group schools, and you'll be just fine, just like everybody else. And Here's the other thing, I know this is the case in the state where we are, and probably in most states, is nobody knows really what your score is, including your clients. Just focus on passing the test, right? Too many people put a lot of stress on themselves that I have to do really great on the state exam. And they put so much pressure that they end up kind of, being too nervous to take the test and get the classes. Pass the test. It's kind of like your driver's test, right? Most of us can't even remember what our score was, right? But we know we have a license, right? And we drive every day. So focus on getting the license. And some people pass it the first time, some people pass it the second time. It's not a big deal. Your broker is not really concerned, because for all you know, it may have taken them a couple times and they didn't get a great score either. Right? So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just go into it, get the information. The test is like, hey, I know the information. They just don't know I know it. So let me go into this test, right? And let them know what I know. And that tends to take the pressure off of feeling like you're good enough, right? Because test anxiety is usually people saying, am I good enough? They need to know if I'm good enough. No, they just need to know what you know. Does that make sense? So just wanted to add that, because a lot of people, especially if you haven't been in school for 10, 15, 20 years, right, it gets to be a bit much. So just wanted to add that part too.
Yeah, and Al, I think you made a great point, many great points there. But we do get that question a lot, like, oh my gosh, I haven't been in a classroom or taken a test in 20,
Yes,
30, 40 years.
yes,
And oh my gosh, our students are all in the same boat. That's
yes.
very, very typical. And when start talking about how to choose a real estate education provider, those are the things. One of the things to consider is, are they there for me, answering those questions, supporting me, and recognize that, hey, maybe maybe test anxiety is a real thing. And many people, if they do struggle, it's generally because they're not going to be an absolutely fantastic real estate licensee and professional, but you need to find the provider that can get you past that exam and give you the attention, have the instructor. So I think a lot of those comments were great. The only other thing I wanted to piggyback on that both of you gentlemen talked about was the licensing process. And every state is different and the hours vary tremendously. We do have on our different websites, and again, they'll be listed at the end of the presentation and we'll send you more information, but we do have student success associates available to walk you through those steps to licensure, make sure that you understand for your specific state, how many hours is it, and do I need a sponsoring broker or do I not, and those kinds of things. But a lot of it's very similar. There's an education component, an exam component, and some sort of how you can do business either on your own or with an existing real estate company. So just wanted everyone to know that those resources are available and we'll be getting that out. So talking a little bit more, you both went into a little bit about what to look for in an education provider. And in today's day and age, we're looking at all kinds of alternative delivery methods and what people have access to. And can you talk a little bit about what kinds of things we should be looking for in a real estate school? You both touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. Mike, if you would, just talking a little bit more about, if someone's looking for a real estate school, what are some of the standout things that they should be looking for?
I think there's two things, Tina. Great question. That provider, who are you going to partner with to get that pre-license education piece? I think flexibility is the number one thing, because your schedules vary. So can you take classes on the weekend? Can you take classes through the week? Can we do something in the evening? Further, given the current pandemic, maybe you can't take classes, live classes at all. So what other options do I have? Is there an online piece? Can I take it strictly online? pre-recorded essentially, and can I take it on my schedule? Do I have to take it in order? Do I have to take the first day, and the last day, or can I mix them up? And largely you can. Is there a webinar option where there's a live instructor with kind of a PowerPoint and you sit at home and the instructor's at home or what have you, and it's presented that way? Otherwise, as long as it's flexible and it meets with your schedule, that providers, I mentioned earlier, other things to look for, test preparatory products, assistance, service, because I'm telling you, and Al just told you too, your focus needs to be in those classes to pass the test. Once you pass the test, you can get with a broker, get with an experienced salesperson, what have you, and learn the business.
Mm-hmm.
What you're trying to do in school is pass the test. So make sure your provider and ask around the references, look online, what have you. You can get an idea what providers focus on, because not all do. What providers focus on passing that test, and what are graduates of that school saying about how that institution helped them pass the test, and were those products, additional products there to help them get them over the line.
Yeah, that's great. Al, any additional thoughts? We've talked a little bit about it, but
Yeah, Mike covered really the important stuff. The flexibility. Most of us are fully functioning adults who have a lot of things going on in our lives and need need that schedule flexibility.
yeah,
And then some of us do need to be in front of somebody who's actually talking and explaining. And so, yes, during this, pandemic and, not being able to be all in the classroom, then live streaming classes in this kind of format where an instructor is there explaining things more than just you reading online material, and where you can ask questions of an instructor, can be beneficial. So having all those various options available to you is great. And I know, through some of the Calibri schools, we have various options for students to be able to do all of those, even in the same package that they may purchase. They have multiple ways they can get the information. And so that flexibility is very, very important for us, fully functioning adults, I call us, right? Whose schedules are all over the place. And then, yes, the additional study and review materials, very, very important, to be able to do that and review those things. When I took my courses, I took the classes in the spring. I didn't take my test until the winter. Because life happens, right? And life happened. I didn't take my test until the winter, but I was able to actually go and do a review course, what was called the Crammer course, right? Where we are. And did that and went and took the test and was able to pass it. So even with that time gap, having that in the package that I purchased from the school, which was actually one of the Calibri group schools that I took, 20 years ago, then that was very helpful, and it was already included in the package and paid for. So I didn't have to go searching and finding a way to get, review and brush up on the information. So those things are very important.
great,
And
great.
I want to say price is not always the best factor. Cheap is not always good. So make sure you're getting what you're paying for, right? So I did
Yeah.
want to mention that as well, right?
I appreciate those comments, both of you. And the only other thing that I'll add, and I think you both are fabulously humble, but what I hear over and over and over again from many, many students, I've talked to tens of thousands, the instructor makes all the difference in the world. And even for online students that choose to do a self-paced online, that maybe they can only attend at certain hours of the day, that are less traditional and they're self-paced, they have the ability to email an instructor, call an instructor, jump on a webinar type session for open office hours and get questions answered. So I think just having that ability to reach out and connect with an instructor is something that is just critically important. And then to your point, Al, the opportunity to have flexibility in that schedule, because let's face it, life happens and it's really hard to plan for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It's a lesson we've all learned recently if we hadn't learned it before. And so, right? So that ability to say, you know what, I couldn't make it to this class. Can I reschedule? Or, hey, I sat in that class, but I wasn't fully clear and focused. So I'd like to sit back through it because there's a concept that maybe I'm struggling with. So a provider that allows you to sit back in. And then, of course, student success associates that are there to help people through the process, I think is very, very important. It's not easy, but you can do it, right? And it's well worth the effort that you put into it. So I just wanted to add a couple of those comments there. So as we talk about going through the process, and now we've gone through and gotten licensed, right? Now we're looking for a broker, and maybe somebody starts that before, maybe they're starting it during classes, maybe after. What are some of the things that they should think about when they're determining what the best fit and best size and best is for them? What should they be thinking about? Because, all of us are different. We value different things. So just give us some ideas. And why don't we ask Al to start with that one?
All right. So, great question, because this is a common question that I'm sure Mike gets as well in class. How do I choose a broker, and what do I do here, and how do I, that's a nervous question that a lot of right folks have, especially if in your state that is a requirement for you to start business. Now, I always say the number one question I believe agents should ask a broker is, how many people are available to me when I have a question or an issue, right? Because as we talked about, real estate happens when it happens. It's not a 9 to 5, time frame where you clock in and clock out. You may be showing a house at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. You're showing them a couple of houses, and then they call you at 8 or 8:30 and say, hey, we want to write an offer on the first house we saw tonight, or the second one. And here it is 8:30 at night, and this is your first transaction or your second one. And you're like, oh boy, right? I went through the classes, I went through the training, and I remember kind of what they said, but now I'm in it. And or no, here's the other thing: no two transactions are exactly the same. Every transaction has its own little it's like a fingerprint, right? One little change makes it different. And so in that moment, when you need to reach out, is it reasonable to think that only one or two people will be available to you at 8:30 at night on a Thursday or Wednesday, right? Or Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon or whatever time it is. So how many people, you need 3 to 5 names and phone numbers of folks to call, right? Because all the pretty stuff, all the nice offices, all that bells and whistles and all that stuff is great, except when you need to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and nobody's answering the phone, right? And so to me, in my opinion, that's the number one question. How many people are available to me, right? The number right here on the screen. What support do you offer your agents? That's a big thing. We all really do the same thing. No matter what state you're in, the same license is required, the same paperwork. You'll be sitting across the closing table from another agent at a whole different brokerage you've never heard of. But you're both getting paid on the same transaction. So how different are we? Not that different, except for personality, kind of the culture question you have here on number 2 on the slide. Is personality of the brokerage, more importantly, personality of the people you'll be working directly with, your mentor, trainer, manager, broker, whoever that is. Is there a good relationship there? Is this going to be something that I can, somebody I can learn from, someone who is going to, we're going to get along well and this is going to go well. So all of that is important. The commission split, honestly, I would say is not as important starting out as it is later. Because if you need mentoring and training, which you do, I always say this business is like driving a car, right? You learn the business in the business. And in most states, when you get your temporary driver's license, you have to have somebody in that passenger seat, right? Coaching you through how to do and navigate, right? Every situation you approach. And so, um, and so, that commission split, you can't expect a high split if you want somebody to sit in that seat and really spend some time with you. Does that make sense? And so the split is not as important as it is, is not as important early on as it is later on when you become a little more self-sufficient and, you can handle it on your own. So again, the support and the personality of who you're going to be working with, I think those are two critical questions that are right there on the PowerPoint.
That's great advice. Great things for us to think about as we're choosing a company and a broker. Mike, additional thoughts there?
Yeah, Al's giving you great things to think about. I would only add, no sense finding a broker if that's the model in your state that's 100 miles away. So find one in your neighborhood. It's gonna be a lot easier to get over to the office if it's down the street or over nearby, that type of thing. Secondly, if you want to do commercial, or you want to do industrial, or you want to do agricultural, there's no sense hooking up with a primarily residential brokerage because they don't practice much of that. Or conversely, you want to do residential and you hook up with the most prominent commercial broker in your market. Well, he probably or she probably doesn't do much residential. So interview those brokers. We tell students, they're not interviewing you, you're interviewing them. You're choosing the broker. They're not choosing you. There's probably not a broker in the United States wouldn't take every single one of you in for at least a little while, but you can pick the broker that's a good mix. So nearby proximity, I think, matters. Two, what do they practice? Are they a primary residential agent? Well, then you want to do residential. That's maybe a good fit. Number three, and Al mentioned this, that commission split. I would be looking as a new agent to minimize monthly costs right
Correct.
away out
Correct.
the gate,
Yes.
because there's agents that pay $50 a month. There's agents that pay $5,000 a month. Well, there's no sense getting into a $5,000 a month plan when you're not going to sell any real estate for maybe a month or two or three. You're out $15,000. You haven't sold anything yet. Let's not worry so much about the split. 60% or 80% of zero is still zero right out the gate. So
That's right.
let's minimize the monthly costs and not worry so much about the split. And I'll tell you, I'll end with this thought. If you're a superstar, if I'm your broker and you're selling a bunch of real estate and you come in my office 6 months later and say, hey, I've sold a bunch of real estate, can you make me a better deal? There's a good chance I'll make you a better deal at that time. So don't worry about your introductory deal. Worry about working into a better deal as you succeed in this business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great thoughts and comments as individuals are getting started, just to think about, right? And how to navigate through that whole process. So that being said, it actually flows quite nicely into what do startup costs look like? And we shared some numbers on the screen, but would love for you to comment on those startup costs. So Mike, why don't you continue and kind of talk through those a little bit, and then we'll go back to Al.
Yeah, the slide here gives some outline or parameters into what you might expect for testing fees, which are not material necessarily. Pre-license, you might be, as it says there, anywhere from hundreds of dollars to $1,500, if you will. Most real estate licensees in the United States are presented with then an option to become, we tell students here in our market, the state doesn't make you a realtor. The state makes you a salesperson or a broker, for example. So joining those associations, I regularly quote something like about $1,500 or so in additional cost that first year. in terms of memberships. National Association of Realtors, if you become a member, your state association, your local member, MLS, Multiple Listing Service, and then probably a little bit less the second year. That first year, you're buying business cards, you've got signs, you got lock boxes, you got website, maybe some other expenses that aren't necessarily duplicated year 2, year 3. You kind of hope you run out of business cards, but maybe you don't, so you don't have to reorder them for a while. So you know, maybe in round numbers it's $1,500 the first year, and maybe it's $1,000 the next year, or $1,000 the next year as well. Brokers have different plans, companies have different plans. So sit down with different brokers who you are interviewing, by the way, and say, hey, how do you work in those expenses? Can those expenses be pushed back until I cash my first check? Can I pay in installments? Can I spread those payments out? Because I don't have any income right here at the front end. How can you guys help me get my feet on the ground and not incur a lot of expense up front? So a lot of brokers have some creative, I think is a fair word, creative ways to get your wheels turning and get into the business a little easier.
That's great, Mike. And Al, any additional thoughts on fees that maybe we haven't discussed?
No, I think Mike covered a lot. Really, again, talking to, because it varies from state to state and sometimes from broker to broker, what the total amount of fees may be, what the broker may cover, what they may not cover, you know, and so really talking to them, talking to the school, gathering as much information as you know, as you can up front. But you definitely want to be prepared to invest in your business, right? Be prepared to invest in your business. This is not a job, okay? A job means you can go with no money as long as you can survive for the first couple of weeks to your first paycheck. That, and I'm gonna say it the way I mean it. This ain't that, okay? So be prepared to invest in your business, and that means maybe a couple of $1,000s, right? But again, you know, I don't want to give specifics because it varies not only from state to state, but from even company to company and what you decide. But understand that this is a business you're investing in. This is not a job that you are starting. And it happens different for many of us. Some of us hit the ground running and start making money in the first 30, 45 days. You know, you have a closing, that's great, but that it doesn't work that way for everybody. Sometimes it takes you, you know, 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you know, before you see any money, any income. Sometimes up to 6 months, right? Now, I did this 20 years ago, and I had a cleaning business when I started this, so I was kind of doing both, but it took me 6 months to close my first deal. Some of you may actually close a deal again in the first 30, 45 days. Some of you may, you know, close multiple deals in the first 60 days. And so just be prepared. Hope for the best. Prepare for, I won't say the worst, but prepare for less than the best, right? And so save as much money as you can, and or you know, try to accumulate as much money as you can, so that when you get started, you're not in panic mode or desperation mode, right? As much as you know possible, because desperation usually causes all kinds of other issues. So do as much as you can to be prepared as possible financially, so that you can learn and do what you need to do to get started appropriately.
Well, Al, I think that was beautiful advice for someone looking to get into real estate, or really anyone at all. Really,
Yeah.
really great advice. So thank you for that. So before I go into some last thoughts that I'd like to get from each of you, I know that we have several questions. And first I want to cover, I saw a couple of questions come in earlier that I'd love to get your thoughts on. One of them is, I'm going to be moving from my state to another state in a couple of years. What's your advice on getting licensed now versus waiting until I move? Would it be valuable to get it sooner than later? And what does that look like when I move from state to state? So I don't know if either, who wants to jump in. Al, thoughts on that?
So I would evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, honestly. One of the things to consider is what's called reciprocity between states. So each state has its own licensing and its own licensing requirements. However, some states have agreed with each other to accept all or part of the requirements from your current state, right? So to get a license in that reciprocal state, okay, you may have to do minimal, right, courses or meet minimal requirements, or maybe just take a portion of the test and you've met all the pre-licensing requirements. It just depends on what that state is and where you're moving to. Now, should you get the current state and then the next one? Well, the reciprocity agreement may help you decide that, because maybe the state you're in now has easier requirements than the state you're moving to, and they have a reciprocal agreement. So you would need to understand that dynamic so that you can say, huh, well, maybe I should get this one because it's going to be a little easier and simpler for me to get, and then do the easy transition to the other state, right? Or it could be vice versa, where you decide, well, I'm going to be moving in 2 or 3 months, so maybe I'll just go ahead and wait and do it in the new state. So it is more of an individual question and or answer or response, but those are the things that would need to be considered, is the reciprocity agreements as well as the time frame as to when you think you're going to be moving, because you could be making money now in the state you're in before you get there in the business and have some experience at least in a typical transaction, even though again from state to state paperwork is different, processes are different, but you will have at least done it before. Right? So that would be my response to that.
That's great. And it sounds like if it's a couple of years away, don't wait, get started and get
Right.
your get the that experience, and hopefully if there's reciprocity, you won't have to do it all over again. And just to piggyback that, I don't know that we covered this earlier, but most states, the state exam consists of national content and state specific content. So
Mhm.
even if you do have to do it over again, and hopefully you don't, but if you are going to a state that does not have reciprocity, you've at least been through it before, and hopefully the information won't be new to you. And even if it's state specific content, there might be variation state to state, but the vocabulary and the concepts will be familiar to you. So when you go and you take that state portion, it may flow a little bit more seamlessly. So just some additional thoughts there. The other question I had, I'll turn this to Mike, and then we'll go back to Al too, because I'd love for you both of you to comment. I thought it was a great question that came in, and it's, what are some of the beginner tricks or information that you wish you knew when you got started that you didn't know? And I thought that was a great question. So, Mike, do you have any comments on that? Can you remember back when you did
Uh,
that?
I can, barely, but I can. And getting started, I probably wasn't patient enough. I was too impatient, and I wanted to, you want to get that first deal, and you almost take it regardless of the magnitude of the price or the market or the area. I think some patience. I think I probably didn't look around and find successful or superstar agents and try to partner up. I wanted to start my own deal, so to speak. And again, if I had just kind of stopped and analyzed and been willing to wait a little bit, I probably would have made better decisions and followed some footsteps of agents who had been successful, because I tell every agent in class now that's the best way to get started, not because I did it, because I realize now I should have done that. And so a mentor, a team approach, possibly, good way to start. Maybe not quit that day job, maybe work part-time, and if you're on a team, you can, then you're more easily working part-time and the other team members are making up for your time away. That would be the ideal way to start, in my opinion. I wish I had done that. I didn't. I made it despite that, But if I was doing it over, I would find a team or a mentor to partner up with and ride that wave for a while.
Hindsight is 2020, isn't it?
So, yes.
Yeah.
Al, same question. Thoughts about that? What do you wish you knew?
So what I always tell new agents, because the question is similar or sometimes worded slightly different. What's the first thing? What's the main thing I should do as a new agent? And I say, let everybody you know you're licensed, right?
Right.
Because
Great.
one of the mistakes I'm sure Mike can attest to, and one of the worst things that can happen is you've been licensed 3 months, 6 months in, you run into somebody at the grocery store out and about whose contact information is already in your phone or you already have, and you haven't talked to them in however long, and they ask you, so what are you doing now? And you're like, yeah, I'm licensed. I got my license 6 months ago. And they're like, really? I wish I'd have known. I just closed on my house last week, right? And whose fault is that? Right? It's not their fault. It's your fault because you didn't let the world know, right? Especially your sphere, your folks whose information you already have, you didn't let them know that you were licensed. Okay. So, one of the most critical things is let everybody you know you're licensed. Okay. Now, some of the folks out there are thinking, well, the people I know, they're not buying a house or selling a house. I don't know anybody who even has a good credit score, right? Well, it's not so it's about them, but it's not just about them. It's about the people they know, right? Because your first line of business is not always likely to come from the people you know specifically. It's from the people they know, right? And so you have to let everybody you know your license so that then when they talk to somebody later that day or the next day who says, yeah, I'm thinking about selling my house. Oh, you need to call my friend, right? Such and such. And here's their information. They are licensed now. But if you never tell your friends and your people, they can never pass that information on, right? And so that's one of the mistakes I made because I ran into it, happened to me probably a handful of times, and I'm probably underestimating that. But is that for some reason I thought when I got my license that there was a mind reading, an announcement to everybody's brain that I had a license, and that's not how it works, right? The other thing I would say is talk to people. Talk to people, right? And what does that mean? And a lot of people overcomplicate that. Now, there's a lot of ways you can talk to people. It doesn't have to be verbally. Now we talk to people through text message, through social media, through postcards, through all those different ways, right? That we talk to people or communicate to people who we are, what we do. Okay. Now, licensees come a dime a dozen, as the saying goes. There's plenty of folks out there who are licensed. This is a relationship business. So go out and start reconnecting relationships or creating new relationships. Okay. And that's how you get business. Now, one of the questions I get from new agents, well, what do I say to people? Well, what were you saying to people before you got a license? Start there, right? Say that because you don't want to be a walking commercial or billboard because that turns people off, right? Nobody wants to be sold. We walk into a store to buy something and the person who works there says, "Can I help you?" And we immediately say, "No, I'm good." Right? Because we don't want to be sold even though we're looking to buy. Okay? And so you have to think about it from the other way. Don't try to sell people. They need to like you first, and then they will choose you, right? As Mike said, when they will choose you because of who you are, what you do, and maybe even what you specialize in. And so create the relationship. Don't be weird about it. Don't, I learned the business, the 3-foot rule. Anybody within 3 feet of you, you ought to be willing to talk to them. Now, in a non-weird way, right? You don't want to just, strike up odd conversations with everybody within 3 feet of you, but be willing to have a chit chat, conversation with anybody who, if the opportunity presents itself, and then being, oh, by the way, I sell real estate. If I can help you, if I can give you information about your neighborhood, I'd be, happy to do so. And it's great to give them your info. It's good to give them your information. It's great to get theirs. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going into some broker training, but it's still great to get theirs, because then you're not relying on them to reach out to you. You actually now can initiate the contact and reach out to them. So I could talk about this all day, but I won't. But those are some things that you definitely want to think about as a new agent. Is be ready to create relationships and rekindle relationships, and just reach out, ask folks how they doing, how's their family, that kind of thing. Don't start out with, but then be intentional at the end to say, hey, I am licensed now, I'm trying to get my business started, please help me. If you know anybody, I'd be glad to help them. Be intentional with that. Just don't be a walking commercial or billboard, because people don't want to be sold. Right? So those are things that I wish I had known starting out, because I would have been a lot more proactive, and would have, maybe it wouldn't have taken me 6 months to close my first deal. Right? So yeah.
Well,
So great
I have
question.
a feeling the folks joining us today won't take them 6 months, because you just gave them like a whole broker training book of advice right there. That was beautiful, Al. Great, great.
Right.
So I am going to turn over to Jessica real quick and see if we've got some questions coming in that we can direct to the group here. I know we were scheduled till 4, but I think Al and Mike, if it's okay with you, I'd love to entertain some questions.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Jessica, do we have some questions coming in?
Yes. The first question, how has COVID changed the real estate industry? And do you have any advice on starting a career during the pandemic?
I think that's great. So Mike, why don't you start with that one, and then we'll have Al join in too.
Well, Al's been showing you his smartphone, and in a pandemic, you can't live without it. You're going to have less contact with the public. Open houses have changed from having 30, 40 people in the living room to maybe a virtual tour using technology, cameras, drones, things like that to show off, using the internet to a greater extent than even we were using it before in a pandemic. Being able to talk by phone, Al's been talking about all the paperless, less ink, less paper, because we're sending things through the internet or through email, scanned documents, and electronic signatures and things like that. So actually, I think the real estate industry was adequately prepared for the pandemic. I think a lot of real estate agents were already doing some of the things that we're finding now all real estate agents need to do, with less contact and social distancing and all that kind of thing. But it's really sharpened the knife, so to speak, on the technology side. Tina, look what we're doing as far as pre-license education.
Yep.
We're webinars. We never even thought about doing, well, maybe you did, but I never thought about doing that before. Now I'm better at using that technology, and I'm using it now for other things. What the pandemic has done, not just in the real estate industry, but in the appraisal industry, the auctioneering industry, lots of industries, it's pushed people into things that they never thought they would have to do or even try. Well, now we got to try it. And once you cross that line, once you get through that threshold, you say, oh, okay, you know what? I can do it this way. We can solve this problem a different way. We can go a different direction. So I think the pandemic's been, life changing in a terrible way for a lot of people. But I think for a lot of professionals, real estate professionals certainly included, it's helped us be better agents. It's actually given us more tools, opened us to new ideas. So I think the pandemic's been kind of a blessing in disguise in many ways.
Yeah, great insights there, Mike. Al, how about you? I know you've got some thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, here's the irony, is I've been busier since the shutdown, since the quarantines, than I was before. And many agents in our office have experienced the same thing. And we, where I am, we're pretty tech savvy already. and we use a lot of the technology tools. As Mike said, we were really prepared ahead of time. We were, our industry as a whole has already kind of gone that way, which is, that's a double-edged sword too. But in this circumstance, it has really been beneficial. And as far as the real estate industry goes, in trying to assist financially, everybody who's been negatively affected, interest rates have dropped, and that actually kind of helped our real estate business as well, because now people can get in a fixed, loan, fixed interest rate loan at a very low rate. And people are more, anxious now than they've ever been. So really the pandemic has somewhat helped our business, even though, like Mike said, I know it's hurt and injured a lot of folks, but our business has really been helped. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice entering the real estate market when the market is hot,
Yes.
right? Like it's
Yes.
a nice time to enter when the business is there and there's a lot of activity. And I know just people's lifestyles are changing and what they're looking for in a home. People tend to be staying home more, so what they're looking for are vacation homes versus travel and those kinds of things. Are you seeing some of that as well?
Yes. Actually, I just made a referral of a family member who lives in Michigan and is looking to get a second home in the Georgia, South Carolina area. And so, yes, that's been happening. We're in Ohio. I don't know how many people are buying second homes in Ohio, but, or,
Right.
but, from Michigan to, that Florida, Georgia, that kind of the coastline there, that makes sense. And I made a referral, like I said, of a family member there, and that's happening quite a bit. So I have seen that.
Mhm.
Yep, I have seen
Yeah,
that.
and I bet we have a lot of people on the phone who are on the call that have areas around them that they do have vacation home areas.
Absolutely.
So I know we've been seeing some of that. I also want to mention, as I know a couple of people are dropping, that we're only available till 4, but I have received the question as to whether this will be recorded, this session, and it will be recorded. RISMedia will have it on their website, and we will get a link out to everyone so that they can get it through Real Estate Express and our other brands as well. So just wanted to jump in and say that. Jessica, any other questions coming in?
Yes. Michael from California asked what he should be doing now to wait for his exam since the testing centers are backlogged since COVID, since the reopening, and if there are any real estate jobs that do not require a license while he's waiting to take the exam.
That's a great question. We've heard a lot of that happening. Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Well, sure, and I got good news. There are a lot of real estate related jobs. Brokers, major brokers have marketing departments, people to answer the phone or reception area, technology people that are writing software and or related. And it doesn't, some of those jobs are filled with real estate licensees because they have the background, the experience, but many of those folks don't have a real estate license. You don't need a real estate license to do that. Many of those government jobs, title companies, anything real estate related, lenders to appraisal business or what have you, all of them have folks who don't have licenses that are working in those areas. The other thing I would tell this person, I think he said California, you can get ready to take that test. You can't really, you don't want to necessarily, I think maybe you can over prepare, but practice questions and get more familiar with the material so that you can walk into that test and pass it on the first run and get out there and start making money. So I would prepare for the test and maybe find a real estate related company that you have interest in and say, hey, I don't have my license yet. Can I put up signs? Can I help print material, design marketing materials, software, photos, virtual tours, technology related? Can I help in some way until I get my license?
Yeah, Al, any additional thoughts on that? That was
No,
great, Mike.
Yeah, Mike covered just about all of it. One thing I will reiterate that he did mention is, yes, you want to prepare, but don't over prepare, because sometimes you can turn your brain to oatmeal, right? Is by by cramming, and then no test, right? And so kind of space that out based on their backlog and what you think your estimated time to test will be. But yes, even the team aspect that Mike mentioned earlier, maybe you do look to do some admin work for a team, or even like he said, run out signs, take pictures, whatever that might be based on some of your other skills. But look at some of those opportunities to kind of get familiar with, different aspects of the business. Now, I will say, study your material. Try not to get some of us who've been licensed but not really close to the material after 5 or 10 years. If we had to take the test again, uh, might struggle with the test. So be careful of that. I will want to put out that warning that if a person has been licensed 5 or 10 years or so, but hasn't really been teaching or, any of that close to the pre-licensing material, be careful of, trying to use them as a information source for test material. Use them as an information source for business, how to operate and run the business. But test material, some of those details we kind of evaporate out of our brains after a few years because we're so focused on getting deals closed, right? So that's just one little warning while you're out there kind of working, in the business. Yep.
Mhm. And the other thing I will mention, because we may have several people with that same question or being caught up with the test centers that closed temporarily at the onset of COVID-19, that most states, almost all, are reporting in that those test centers are reopening. They have limited size rooms so that the capacity is a little bit lower. So the process as far as how long it takes to get in to sit for the exam is just a little bit longer, but that they are, for the most part, open across the country, the different testing vendors. And the only other thing that I'll mention is we continue to offer resources to students throughout the country who are in that unfortunate situation, to make sure, like, we don't want their brains turning to mush, sure, but and go away. But when you are ready and you do get that date to test, that you can come back to us and you have access to any of the resources that we have available. And we've got a tremendous amount of resources, because we understand getting past that test is the first step. It's that you need to get through to get your real estate license. So great insights there, guys. Thank you. Jessica, anything else? I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay, we've had multiple questions about the pre-licensing course packages. This attendee asked, when looking at pre-licensing course packages online, I see there are other items in the packages besides the required classes. Should I just buy the basic package, or what other materials are necessary, and are they worth the extra cost?
And I can comment. I think I'll let Al and Mike both comment on your thoughts about the different tools, and just taking the courses kind of bare bones versus utilizing textbooks and exam prep tools and vocabulary tools. How do you think about those?
So I'll start. As I mentioned before, there was at least a 6-month gap for me when I took my test. I took the courses in the spring. I didn't take my test until December. So what was very helpful again was the test prep courses and the extra, items that were in the package that I purchased. So that came in very handy for me in my circumstance. But even if there wasn't that time frame, which, from the last question, there is, maybe some delay. And so those test preparatory materials and courses are very helpful. And so definitely I would say the bare bones package is usually not enough, okay? Because it's one thing to get the material, it's another thing to be prepared for the test, okay? And so the additional items usually will help you fully prepare for the test and just go beyond just the information. Things talking about things like test anxiety as well as practice tests, right? So if you do have a little test anxiety, here's some practice for you to kind of get through it. I know the package we offer here in Ohio, there's a clock ticking and there's all 100, you know, all the questions and all of that, so you can kind of get through that anxiety or that emotion of, oh my gosh, how much time do I have? How much time do I have? How long is this going to take? Well, is the time allotted enough time? And so those extra materials are very, very helpful. Don't skimp out on those, right? Make it make sense. Okay.
That's great commentary. And, you know, it is interesting. There are, you know, the state will often mandate a certain number of hours. And so the education providers develop that number of hours and the content is fabulous. But when you sit down and you go to prepare for the test, you go, oh my gosh, how do I get through 90 hours or 120 hours or 75 hours of content? And where do I study? And I think those exam prep tools really help you focus on, you know, you can't memorize it all. So where is your time best spent in preparing for the exam? So, Mike, any additional thoughts there? Textbooks and vocabulary products, perhaps? Thoughts
Yeah, and
on
I
that?
couldn't agree more with you and Al. Those test preparatory products tend to focus and not and separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And here's what's important to pass the test, because the pre-license is regulated. We have to cover this. I cover things in class, and I know more than cover it. And I say, but you're probably not going to see this on the test. I might get to another paragraph and say, now I have to cover this, and this is on the test. Well, that's what those test preparatory products can do, is focus and pare it down and make it easier to understand. Um, it could be vocabulary, it could be practice questions. In classes I teach, I find folks, not to maybe generalize here, but you know, I got a 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old that just got out of college. They're used to taking tests. They're used to dissecting books and things like that. They may not need all that test prep stuff. I've
Yeah.
got some 55 or 60. They were last in school 30 years ago. They probably do need that test prep item that I needed, that Al needed, that maybe we all needed, because you're just not in practice. You don't ride a bike for a while, not that you can't ride a bike, but you're just not as good at it because you haven't ridden one for a while. So I would think the farther away you are from college, from school, if that last test you took was over 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I would think the packages with all the test prep and all the vocabulary and things like that would be to your advantage. And also, typically our pricing, and I would imagine every provider does this, if you buy the package, it's a little less expensive than, say, a la carte. So if you piece it out, you take just the pre-license and then find out, oh, I need that test prep, I need the cards, I need the vocabulary, I need the, well, now it's going to be more expensive. And not that the expense, I guess the other thing here is, it's, you know, in the big picture, if your pre-license is $900, or your pre-license is $1,200, your pre-license is $1,700, one real estate deal takes care of all. It's
Mhm.
it's a small issue compared to the big opportunities you have once you're licensed. So I wouldn't shortchange. And again, I think the longer it's been since you've been in that kind of academic area, the better it would be to maybe take advantage of the whole boat and load up. Because it certainly can't hurt.
Yeah. It Real estate is a relatively low barrier to entry as far as education, investment, and time investment for really a profession that the career can take you in so many different places. So, yeah, great comments. I don't think we have enough time to go into too many other questions, but what I do want to point out is I put phone numbers on the screen here for our different schools in different states, as well as Real Estate Express and McKissick. And we've got information on specific licensure in all 50 states. We've got our career success counselors available for answering questions, helping to guide you. We've got all kinds of resources available to you that we will send: the income guide, the career guide, and we're here to help. So whatever questions you have, please let us know. We want to see you get through this and be successful. We want all of us to be, for sure. So in closing, and by the way, Al, Mike, you have been awesome. Really enjoyed this time. I think the information you've shared is so valuable. So as we finish up, any additional thoughts or advice for anyone who's stuck with us and they're still here? Just career advice as they're getting started. Last, any final thoughts, Al?
Well, I think I gave quite a bit, so I don't want to take a lot more time. But again, one thing you mentioned, Tina, recently, that was one of the reasons I got into the business. I had a commercial cleaning business, and I was doing okay, but it was a lot of work, a lot of labor, a lot of time. And when I ran into a friend of mine who had a real estate license, and I saw that the barrier of entry was fairly low, right? At the time, it was about $1,100 for me, and about 3 weeks of school in my situation. And I was like, wow, I can be licensed in about 3 weeks and be a professional in a whole nother career and make similar or more money without, breaking my back and cleaning and being out from from daylight to daylight, right?
Yeah.
It was a great opportunity. And so I just, want people to know that there is no ceiling, right? You can make as much money as you want to make if you're willing to get out there and understand that, you have to, you have to get out and do it, right? Nobody's going to do it for you. You have no ceiling. Go, change the world in real estate. Just make it happen. Make it happen. Don't let it happen. Make it happen.
I love it. Well, I think the profession and the individuals that you've educated are very fortunate to have had you, Al. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Mike, any final thoughts, Mike?
Well, I said earlier that my only regret once I got my real estate license is I didn't do it sooner. I had thought about it for about 8 years. Became an auctioneer 8 years before I got my real estate license. And how many times did I go out on an appointment? I'm selling personal property, and they say, well, can you sell the house? Well, no, I don't have a real estate license. So it only took me, Tina, 8 years to decide maybe I ought to get that license. And I hear from countless other real estate licensees who, if I sat down with them today, would say, the only thing I regret is I didn't do it sooner. And for those of you that are out there that are thinking, I've always wanted to explore real estate, or I've always thought I might want to get a real estate license, and you're not, this isn't something you have to do. You can even go through the classes and get the license and not practice real estate. But if you've always wondered, if you've always thought this is maybe where I want to head, I want to explore it, my advice would be get on it. The sooner you get it, the sooner you can experience it, the sooner you can find out what particular avenue of real estate you want to explore, or if real estate's the right fit for you. And I suspect for most of you it will be, but you can't do it until you get in those classes, sign up, get it done, pass the test, and then explore. And so I don't want anybody out there waiting 8 years like I did. If you're thinking about it, let's do it. Let's get on it.
Let's do it. I love it, Mike. And thank you so much. Both Al and Mike have worked with me for a long, long time, and just phenomenal individuals, humans, people, and great instructors. So thank you both for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We will send out the recordings, and I want to wish you all a fabulous week, and hopefully we'll be talking to you, and we look forward to it. We wish you all the success. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.